all of you, have in common with an entrepreneur from Singapore, who is over there in the back of the house, with a diplomat from Rwanda, with 4 tween girls in Virginia, and with Pete Cashmore from Mashable. What do you have in common together? My theory and our theory all along is that we all have in common this belief that empowered by new media and technology, we can make the world a better place. And if we do it working together, as opposed to in our silos, in our sectors, in our industries, in our regions, without that connection, that if we can do that together, we will make a better place even better and even faster than we could if we worked alone. And that's the promise that Plus Social Good is really built upon. It's a global community of innovators, of world leaders, of students, of technologists, of people who care about making this world better and know that they can leverage the tools and technology that they have available to them to do that every day working within their community. We were inspired by the Social Good Summit, as Ruben mentioned, and to join us, oh great, here we go. So here, the one I forgot, the journalist in Kabul, we had an amazing event in Kabul this year. But Plus Social Good, since we started just a year ago, we launched, and we've spread to nearly 150 countries around the world. We have had, our members have had almost a little more than 200 events all around the world, from Armenia to Austin, as I like to say with this one with Nishay and Ruben, collaborating together on this. And more than 20,000 members, fans, and followers in just less than a year. One of the really core things about Plus Social Good is this fact that it is built by the community, and we have 30 incredible local leaders around the globe in almost every single time zone who connect us into the communities that they're working within to build this global movement. And we have a group of unparalleled partners who believe deeply in this mission as well. And I'm so delighted to be able to welcome many of those partners to the stage today. If you guys can come out and join me, we have Asha Curran, who is the director of the Center for Social Innovation at the 92nd Street Y. We have Stacy Martinet, the chief marketing officer at Mashable. We have Caleb Tiller, who is the executive director of communications and public affairs. And we have Nishay Madoyan, who has been a huge partner in building this event and moving it forward. So I'm going to hand the rest of the panel over to these folks with some questions, and we're going to take some questions from you at the end as well. So if you're thinking of anything, please keep it in mind. But just to give a little bit more background, Stacy, Mashable was one of the founding partners of the Social Good Summit. Can you talk a little bit about how the Social Good Summit came to be and then how this all came together?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here and for having me. It's an honor to see so many people come together in Texas during South by who really want to use all of the technology that we're here to learn about, talk about, and apply to change the world. So thank you. So about 6 years ago, just as the social web was really starting to take off, and just as my company and website Mashable was starting to take off, we were seeing people using social media and digital tools to grow their businesses, to grow their careers, but they were also using it to do good, to spread messages, to get funding for projects, to crowdsource things. NGOs were using it to raise awareness. And so we thought, we spend all this time talking about how social media is changing businesses and personal profiles, but what about the world? And so we started this summit, which at the time was very small and humble at the 92Y, and it brought together social entrepreneurs, it brought together venture capitalists, it brought together people who think about these issues all year long in one space to try and connect so that we can start creating good with these tools. And the next year we partnered with the United Nations Foundation, the 92Y, and from there the movement really grew. And when we talk about putting social in front of media, we're moving and have moved from the power of the press to the power of the people. And I think Social Good really showcases that. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to take this summit, which was fabulous in spawning change and bringing people together and getting people the resources they need and the ideas they need globally, right? Because with social and with mobile technology, this is the first truly connected culture. And that's who Mashable writes for every day, and that's why we love being at places like Southwest and having people from around the world here. But if we're a connected culture, this conversation can't just happen in New York. It needs to happen everywhere. And so how do we do that? And so we started organizing through partners like the folks you see up here, the United Nations Development Program, through the Mashable Meetup platform. And we saw that just asking people to get together and share what they were thinking and what their challenges are and how can we help them find solutions. There were over 126 meetups around the world. And people were passionate and they were sharing on all social platforms. And it was eye-opening. And we thought, well, social good can't be just something we come to in September. It has to be every single day. For some of us, it's our full-time job. For some of us, it's our part-time job. For some of us, it's a passion and a hobby, but it's our responsibility to do that. And because we are at this place that's the power of the people, we have to create a network. And I think we think a lot about what is the fifth estate. We all grew up in the fourth estate, and the fifth estate is about the power of the people, but they need organizers. They need direction and they need support. And so that's where Plus Social Good came in, where we want as many people to come into this platform where the partners can help and connect, but really it's about the local issues and bringing them global and back to the local level, like we're doing right here. And so that's how it got started 2 years ago, as Ruben mentioned. And it's just amazing and inspiring to see where we are and the fact that we're all here in this room in Texas, like I said, taking time to get together, people from Singapore, people from all over the country and around the world. So that's where we are and how we got here. And we have a lot of big issues to tackle, and I know we'll talk a lot about that.
That's great. So Caleb, I'm going to throw over to you because I think one of the things that Stacy said was interesting, and I'm curious to hear from the United Nations Foundation perspective. So thinking about bringing power to the people, and that's a role of a journalistic organization to be able to do that. Now with United Nations Foundation, you have direct access to the leaders who make these decisions in the world that we live in. You can go and talk with those leaders as part of your daily work. Why look further than that? What does this bring for you at the United Nations Foundation?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the question, and I really like the fifth estate, power of the people. I'm going to write that down so I can twitch it out later. You're at the UN Foundation, you're right. We have the opportunity and the privilege to work with the UN in a lot of very direct ways on some of the great work that it's doing around global health, around empowering girls, around making sure that children in countries around the world are healthier, making sure that we're getting energy access to people, making sure that we're helping the environment in the best ways that we can. But ultimately, as people think about the UN, while they may think of high-level government officials gathering in New York or gathering in Geneva and talking about these issues, ultimately, the work that the UN is doing is predominantly not just happening there. It's really about people, and it's happening all around the world, in countries around the world. And without partnering with the NGO community and with individuals and citizens throughout the countries that the UN is working in, the kind of results that the UN wants to see cannot really be made. And so, Stacy mentioned that UNDP is directly involved in this partnership, both in the Social Good Summit and now by extension in the Plus Social Good community. And I think that the fact that a UN agency has come directly in and said, we want to be part of this, really it testifies to the fact that the UN sees the value in working with the people that they're trying to help and really realizes that they have to do that, and they have to have folks like the folks here in this room today and the folks who are watching online and taking part in the conversation if they want to make the progress that is to be made in terms of the long-term global goals. And really, I think the thing that's most interesting about it now is that the time is just so right for this conversation to be happening. Stacy talked about the way that the social web has changed in the last few years. It's a lot of those changes and how we can talk to people have also coincided with some shifts at the global level and how we're thinking about international development. So the Millennium Development Goals have been this predominant framework that the UN has been working on and countries around the world have been working on for reducing extreme poverty. And a lot of progress has been made against those. A lot of it has been made in recent years because the world has been focused on it, has been able to talk about it in ways that they really haven't been able to before, because it really was happening sort of up here at the highest government levels. The technology and the ability to communicate has opened that conversation up, has really driven progress by getting nonprofit communities involved, by getting networks of people who care about the issues involved. And that's exactly why we at the UN Foundation and why agencies like UNDP are involved in the Plus Social Good community and trying to drive that. And the other point I would make there is this is also a good time because the international community is thinking about what comes next. The Millennium Development Goals really were set with 8 overarching goals to try to achieve as much as possible by the end of 2015. And the world is really galvanizing to get as much momentum as possible toward those by the end of 2015. But at the same time, the world is coming together and thinking about, well, what comes next? What's the next framework? And there's a big global there's all kinds of conversations going on around the world to bring in thinking of a lot of people. This kind of community plays into that just perfectly.
Well, there's an interesting thing. I go back to what Ruben was talking about before with the work from home day piece, too, trying to figure out how to take these big issues that can seem really insurmountable, that as an individual you may not be able to feel like you can make a real difference in, and localize those. And Nishay, you've had some extraordinary experience doing that, both in Armenia, but also around the world. What does that look like from the community perspective?
Definitely. Well, I mean, the interesting thing for me as I sit here right now is how this all started with nothing more than a Facebook status that my colleague and I came across. And what we did is we wanted to bring the youth in Armenia together from over 48 communities and really open them up to youth across the world who have a lot of the same issues and concerns as they do. And so what we did is we planned a Social Good Summit in Armenia in 2012. And what we saw was that afterwards, there was such a thirst for connection and conversation and action that without us even, encouraging or motivating it, these youth were taking up projects on their own in their communities, and not just, blogging and tweeting and starting websites, but building local partnerships with communities across Armenia. And then we realized that Armenia is such a disjointed country that, if we could do this within the country, why can't we do it globally? So the next year we came together and we were like, let's see what happens. Let's put this together. So we did a Social Good Summit in 2013 with Bangladesh, Honduras, and Armenia. And what ended up happening was we found that Bangladesh, the youth in Bangladesh were having issues engaging with their local governments. Actually, one of our speakers earlier today, Alex Sardar, touched on that. And youth in Armenia were actually able to give them tangible tools and skills and methods to apply and actually leverage their power as youth to their community. And to see that outcome take place and to see the growth of that movement, it really, more than anything, it made us realize that oftentimes we hold ourselves back from taking initiative to join something that might seem like it's growing or it's just at its inception because, the structure may not be there. But what I've realized with Plus Social Good is that the very fact that it is so local is what's helped us grow exponentially and just create this web throughout the world where there's constant diverse information channeling across all communities.
Well, and then we have with this the big idea from United Nations Foundation, UNDP, all of the various partners thinking about these big issues, and then some of this really localized work happening on the ground. But it seems to me that there has to be some sort of connection point between the two. And Asha, this is something that I know you've thought about a lot in your work with 92Y. Is anyone listening? Does it make a difference from that high-level policy perspective?
I feel like, frankly, they have no choice but to listen at this point. I think that to anybody who's paying attention, and leaders are, it's very clear that there's really just at the bottom of all of this that we're talking about, there is really this fundamental shift in the very nature of power that's happening. Due to the social web, due to the kind of action that Nishay is talking about. We think of that as a shift from what we call old power to what we call new power. So old power being exclusive, old power being top-down, new power being inclusive, new power being lateral, old power being like a currency. I have it, you don't. I have it, I might give you a little bit of it. New power being like a current. It flows from one person to another. It's much more organic. And I think that leaders, if we're defining leaders for the moment as in the traditional spheres of power, realize that shift is happening and they have a choice, and the ones who are really forward-looking and the ones who are going to stay relevant are the ones who are going to see that shift as an opportunity rather than a threat, meaning that they're going to see that so many amazing and innovative ideas are coming from the crowd, are coming from people, and are coming from communities, and that those, say, policymakers have the opportunity to implement really powerful new ideas, and that's the position that they're in. So from a Social Good Summit and Plus Social Good perspective, I think we see that fundamental shift happening, and I think we strongly want to encourage voices that are outside of the usual spheres of power. And so we've found ways to do that, new ways to do that every year. So we certainly, all of us are content creators in some sense, and we create great content with the Social Good Summit, and that's how it started. And we have heads of state, and we have celebrities, and those people say great things and do great things. But that's really downloading information onto our audience. And I think that we've come up with new ways every year to also upload. We want to hear what they're thinking. We want to encourage communities to get together all over the world and create solutions and communicate with each other, right, hence Plus Social Good, and to tell us what those ideas are. One example is the keynote listeners that we had at the Social Good Summit this past year. So every conference has keynote addresses or keynote speakers. We had keynote listeners, so people like Judith Rodin, head of the Rockefeller Foundation, Melinda Gates, Richard Branson, Jim Kim from the World Bank. We invited those people to the Social Good Summit not to do keynote addresses, but to actually listen. They came, they stayed on site for hours, talking to our audience, tuning into the global meetups, listening to what was said, and then when they did go on stage to speak, they spoke to what they had heard. So that's just one example of the way that we try so hard to incorporate everybody's voices into the summit.
That idea of the old power, new power is such an interesting model. And Stacey, I'm just curious from your perspective at Mashable, and as you think about journalism and the kind of journalism that Mashable is doing, how does that impact your audience and your publication?
Yeah, so I think of Mashable as a media company, a technology company, but also a community platform. And starting from building from the ground up, I mean, Mashable has become what it is today, a global company. We have 34 million readers through our community, growing organically, being a small company without big budgets. We've grown through the power of the Mashable audience. And so everything we do, the Mashable audience is core. And you see that in the way that we've grown over the years. We started covering just social media. Now we're covering things like what's happening in the Ukraine and the protests there. We're covering big businesses that are being revolutionized by technology. We're covering watches that update you every 2 minutes. So we live in this world that changes so fast, and it's being disrupted by technology and new communications. And so we have a responsibility to that community to talk about it, but also to bring the community together, to connect them, whether that's through sharing, whether that's through offline events like this, or the Plus Social Good platform that we support and empower and hopefully amplify through our own channels. The community is at the core of the responsibility, and I think that's the new model of journalism. And there was a Journalism 2.0 panel earlier, and if you saw my last name before, you're not going crazy, that was my husband. So I spend my life at home and at the office around journalists, so maybe I'm the crazy one. But this new era of journalism is about spotlighting, right? But also about empowering. And we talked about other organizations that are starting to do that. And I think, journalism has a big role, but we talked a little bit about how now it's the power of the people to take that information and do something with it. And we talk about leadership, and one thing that I think is really important, and it's really the people in this room, is we will have new leaders, and because of these tools, that doesn't mean that leadership goes away. Right? After revolution, there has to be reform, and there has to be people that can lead that in a responsible way. They have to lead revolutions in a responsible way, whether they're small revolutions online or so big revolutions like we're seeing in the Ukraine and in Venezuela, in Brazil. So leadership matters more than ever, but we are seeing a new kind of leadership that is more community focused, that does bring everyone together as much as possible. And I think that's nice to think about. Right? But we see cycles of history before us, and it's our responsibility to make that happen. And that's something that we talk about and write about every day at Mashable, and we'll continue to do more so. And the community is at the center of that. We are only smart because our community is smart, and so we rely on them as much as possible.
That's great. I want to do a quick time check, Ruben, just to make sure I know okay, great. So one more question for you, and then I'd like to take this out if the audience has any questions. But as you look ahead to the future, you're a couple years into this, where do you see Plus Social Good and the Social Good Summit going in the future? What do you hope to see from that community and that gathering? Asha,
Oh, geez.
start with you.
Gosh, that's a good question. I think that one strength of the Social Good Summit is that it has been very spontaneous and very organic, and we've really felt empowered to take great ideas and to implement them every year. So I certainly would hope that that would continue, that as it gets bigger, that it doesn't become too institutionalized, and we really still see a lot of that very organic and spontaneous flavor. I also, I think that one of the strengths of the summit is partnerships. And I think that part is so crucial to projects like this in general. I mean, I think that when you look at different sectors, whether it be tech or international development or nonprofit, that you see that each sector has its own jargon, its own language, and it speaks to people in that same sector, and there it becomes an echo chamber. So when you collaborate with others across sectors, you're forced to reframe your work to make it accessible to people outside of your own sector. When you do that, you build new constituencies. When you build new constituencies, they become accountable. They feel accountable for the big issues that we're all tackling. I think that's been one of the major successes of the summit, and I would hope to see that increase and scale in a big way.
Nishay.
I would have to say, I would like to see it continue to diversify. For me, seeing the wealth of knowledge that is poured in, and to see how different youth in different parts of the world have attributed different ways of solving problems, and being able to exchange that with one another and find ways to engage more effectively with their countries and their communities, and that has really been extremely valuable for us, and to see that to continue to grow would be great.
So if you'll permit me, I'll tell a couple of quick stories. One is what's happening today, right? So we heard earlier today that the hashtag SXGood was used 9.9 million times yesterday.
Yeah.
So this community, this is a network of a variety of networks, right? That we've been able to pull together. That Nishay and Ruben have worked so hard in the Social Good Austin team to bring this together, to inject a conversation into South by that wasn't happening a few years ago, and that is the power of the Plus Social Good community. Another example that comes to mind for me is in 1992, there was a global gathering of world leaders in Rio to talk about climate and about the environment. And a young woman, I think she was 11 or 12 at the time, named Severin Suzuki, went and made a very famous speech that was really impactful. And it was her own view. She was telling world leaders what she thought they needed to do differently. And it really called the world to attention. But it was one person's view. 20 years later, there was a reconvening in Rio again, and through this same community, we crowdsourced and we said to the Plus Social Good community, what do you think Severin Suzuki should say to those same world leaders 20 years later? And she, instead of her writing her own speech, she found out from this network. And to me, that's the power of and the future of where we can go with this. It's about building that network, bringing in more voices, and continuing this flow of power that Asha talked about so powerfully. I think it's about recognizing that there's an opportunity to have those exchanges, and that the power really is in the exchange of ideas across borders and through silos that in the past maybe have separated out conversations, and now we can actually talk in across those silos and share ideas in very powerful ways.
Great. I have a question. Is Rodrigo here?
Yes, is he still with us?
Yeah.
Oh, darn.
Okay, well, I got to know Rodrigo, who's in from Rio, through the Rio Plus Social, and we keep in touch, and I feel now very connected to the work that Rodrigo does and his company does in Rio, and so following the news that happens there has a really personal effect on me now. I have a person, and it's Rodrigo and his team that we've worked with, and I think those tiny, tiny connections that are enabled through communications like social media and email and phones, and we can see people's Instagrams from around the world. I follow someone on Instagram and I see what the sunrise looks like every morning in South Africa. Never met this person. So to be a global society, and I think what Nisha said is, how do we then take the tools that we have so that we can collaborate? We have big, big problems. And the solutions come one day at a time, one tool at a time. And so how do we make sure that everyone can share the knowledge, the resource, the solutions they have, and so that we are using our collective intellect, our collective creativity, all of our platforms, all of the partners around these goals. Because at Mashable we work with clients, we work with NGOs, we work with partners, we have readers. And everyone has a different agenda and a different goal, but at the end of the day, we have one world, and now we are truly connected in a way that we have never been before. So if Plus Social Good can help make a tiny connection for one person, 2 people, 5 people, 500,000, 5 million people over the next 5 years, then I think that is a job done okay, but it's still only the beginning. And so that's what I hope we can do through events like this.
That's great. Thank you so much to all of you. I'd love to open it up if anybody has any questions for the panelists. Great. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Wayne LaChapelle, and I'm wondering if the panel is familiar with the term of conscious capitalism. If that's at all playing out in the things you're doing around the globe. It's a type and a way of doing business that John Mackey here at Whole Foods promotes around the world. It's a new way of doing business with consciousness on both sides of the business table, the company as well as the investor. I'm just wondering if that's at all at play here.
That's great. So the question, if folks weren't able to hear it, was about conscious consumerism, and is this group thinking about that as part of the overall Plus Social Good framework? Does anybody? I have a idea.
Actually, it's great that you brought that up because we have a panel coming up on social enterprise, and we have a speaker, Jose, who started this company called Voss, and they're going to really talk about what the new bottom line is for companies. It's no longer about profits and what you're bringing in at the end of the month, but what kind of ecosystem are you establishing? What kind of environment are you enabling? So hopefully you guys can stick around and we can explore that a little bit more.
Can I also just add, and it's not specific to how the network and the community has addressed the issue yet. It's about how it can happen in the future. So the way that the Plus Social Good community has been designed is to really enable and empower and give tools to the members, right? And so Corey talked earlier about the 200 plus events that have happened around the world in the last year. The members of the community have hosted those events. They've brought together either within their local communities, the people they know, or they've designed something to happen online to talk about those very same issues. This event today is a perfect example of them. In the panel that's happening later today, as well as the brand panel that we heard earlier today. So the conversation that you're talking about is happening within the community, and it will continue to as long as the members of the community bring it to the fore and say, I want to host a conversation either online or in my hometown about X. And if that's conscious capitalism, or if it's about working with brands, I'm sure that we'll see a lot of events like that. And actually, I would take that opportunity to ask all of you. You may not even know it, that you're members of the community right now by being in this room. And I would ask you to actually take the next step and go to plussocialgood.org, sign up, become an actual ongoing member, and think about how you can take part in those conversations, share content, and maybe even think about hosting events in where, I'm not sure where you're from, sir, but wherever your hometown happens to be. Okay, right here in Austin.
Great.
Let's have an
Yeah.
event. Let's have an
Let's
event
do
like
it.
that right here in Austin.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there any more? Great. Yes. Yes.
Hi, I'm part of a team that's organizing thank you, a social good hackathon here in Austin to benefit local nonprofits. And ATX Hack for Change, check it out this summer. It'll be awesome. And I'm wondering, what is the global network of hackathons for social good like? Because I've been talking to a lot of people about it here at South by Southwest, and it doesn't seem to be quite the prevalent phenomenon I had assumed it was.
So this goes to the sort of crossing, bringing together communities that aren't around. Do you want to talk a little bit about that technology community and how do we think about the hackathon model?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's happening. I don't think there has been 1 or 2 or even 5 places where you can really see models to implement. They're just happening at a local level or around a certain topic, and that's one of the goals of this community, is to try and bring those together for either learnings, best practices, resources. And I think the Plus Social Good community has recognized that hackathons themselves, I mean, that's real power for change. If people are building tools that then the Plus Social Good community can use, I think that's a big challenge, and I think we're welcome and open to ideas on how we do better on that area in particular. And Corey, is there anything you want to add on what you've heard?
No, I think that it's, as Caleb said, and I think this is the overall point of Plus Social Good, which is that it is what the community makes it. And there is this huge opportunity. We know we have our sights set on some key regions, some key kinds of content, some key kinds of organizers and people that we want, but ultimately it is a product of this community. And the value is in the ability to be able to bring all of that together and share across geographies and across sectors. So I think it's there's an extraordinary opportunity to be able to take those kinds of events and those kinds of activities and aggregate and amplify those so that people around the world all have a view into what's happening, not just next door, but all the way around the corner where they can't just see quite as easily. So I think that is all the time that we have. I want to say thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. So please give
Thank you.
Christine
Thank you.